Hello, welcome to class. Hi, Navena.
Hi.
All right, so today I'm going to be winging it. I haven't really had any time to prepare, but what I'd like to do is we've talked about finding elements, and now we want to talk about challenges with finding elements, things like when you need to wait for an element. So I'm going to get started. I'll create a new project. I've created a repository here. Training Java Selenium on OneShore, so I'll share this repository. Okay, so I've shared that into the chat. And next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a project and go for it. I told you last week that we would have a repository set up that we could work off of. I didn't get to it, so we're doing it right now. So I'm going to launch IntelliJ and create a project and add it to the repository, add the dependencies, and get started. So I'm going to create a new project in IntelliJ. And here we go. I need to bring it on screen. All right, so I select my project SDK. I'm going to choose my latest version of the Java SDK, and I'm going to call it, what is it, Training Java Selenium. And so the first thing I'm going to do is get it into GitHub. So accept terms of legal notice of beta. Okay, I don't want the beta. Let's scrap that plan. Let's remove this. And then I'm going to bring up a terminal, kill that off. All right, and then what I'll do here is I will actually go about the reverse way. I have this empty repository, so I'm going to create it here in the same folder, and then I will create my project in this Git project folder. So you can see I have nothing here. There's nothing except for this git ignore file, and it's just set up to ignore the Java target build directory for maven, all these versions of the pom.xml. And then what I also want to do is I want to actually I want to go to my git ignore, and I want to also eliminate my IntelliJ project because not everyone's going to use IntelliJ. And so I want to eliminate anything that starts with star.iml, that's the IDEA project, or the .idea folder. And you'll see how to do that in a minute. So I forgot my dash in. Yeah. All right, so now let's create that project in GitHub again, or in IntelliJ again. Just avoid any Java entanglements. Temp training Java Selenium finish. All right, so it creates this. Do you want, oops, it's moving it off screen. Do you want to add the following file to Git? Yes, I do. Where did IntelliJ go? It has disappeared off my screen. My Mac was glitching here. Okay, so you've probably seen me do this a couple times. I'm going to add my Java dependencies. So I'm going to add the Maven compiler plugin, build plugins, plugin, Maven compiler plugin. All right, it's moving slow. Just in case it doesn't auto-detect it, I'm going to search for it while it's waiting. All right. That's the group ID I need, so I'll just grab all of this. Oops. It's not a dependency, it's a plugin. I'm going to add my configuration. We're sticking to Java 1.8 just to use the lowest common denominator. All right. Doesn't like my pom.xml. I had a different problem last week with this. I'm going to create a new test. Just call it simple test. And the first thing we want to do is we want to add this to Git. We want it to auto add. We call this the sanity test. Stick with 4.12, which has been the standard for many years for JUnit. All right, that re-import That took care of it, okay. So we just want to assert true. False. So maybe we should call this an insanity test because we think false is true. We can hide the maven stuff. All right. Assertion error. Insanity test. All right, so let's try changing this. We want true to be true. So we'll run this again. And now we have a passing sanity test. So let's rename that to sanity. All right, so we've got JUnit. We've got it added to our pom.xml in the test scope. Now let's add Selenium. We'll just create another test and we'll call it public. Let's create it in a different file. We'll call this simple Selenium test. Yes, we'll add this file to Git as well. And then once we get this up and running, hey Andre, it should be the same link as last week. So yeah, let me just grab that from Slack. And post it in, I guess, into Slack. There you go. We'll see you in a minute. So we're going to create a WebDriver instance. And we need to import that. So we'll add the Maven dependency, look for WebDriver. Here we go. Org, OpenQA, Selenium. So we want to add the latest version here. We shouldn't have to do that Maven update. Once I switch over to the new computer, maybe we'll see that go away. All right. So we've got a WebDriver instance. What is the first thing we've got to do? We've got to instantiate it. So new Chromedriver for now. Let's see. We want to change this from our Selenium API to Selenium Java. All right, with Selenium Java. Why is the auto import not working on IntelliJ? That makes me angry. All right, we've got a WebDriver, we've got a Chromedriver. Now we want to get a URL, test it out. Hey, Andre.
Hello, I didn't want to bother you. Thank you for letting me in.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just winging it today. I didn't get anything saved. I'm back and forth between computers. And this morning when I was training, our goats got out and we had to round those up. So anyway, we've got a test running. It opens up a page and that's all it does. So now I'm going to do live what I said I'd do last week. I have my configuration in my pom.xml. I have a simple test and a simple Selenium test. I'm also going to call driver.quit here at the end. We'll rerun this. And then we want to assert equals, because we want to also make sure our asserts are working. And let's go ahead and add one more project, because I want to make this useful and as easy to extend from. What I want to add is AssertJ. It's an assertion library. You can use the JUnit asserts, but this just gives friendlier output, and I've mentioned this before. So now I can do things like assert that driver.getTitle contains training. Something like that. I don't even know what the title is. And I'm going to update that eventually. Import static method. Looks like I need to go back to Maven, re-import. Because IntelliJ is still not auto-importing from last week. That's what happens when I only use Java 1 day a week. Now I can get it from org AssertJ core. Now we have this, so I have an actual test now. It opens Chromedriver, it gets the title, and then it checks that the title contains training, and then it closes the browser. I'm going to do one more thing before committing this code, and that is I'm going to refactor my test to have a before and an after method so that it has a setup and a teardown. So it opens the browser, it goes to training.oneshore, it asserts, and it passes. Let's just double check this to make sure, because we want to make sure that our tests are testing something. If a test passes, because our assertion logic or something isn't actually catching errors, then it's not a valuable test. So it's important to make sure that your tests not only pass, but that they fail when there's something wrong. And you can see here, this test failed, and the assertion error means that it didn't get to the driver quit. It threw an exception at this point, an assertion error. And we can look that assertion error expecting OneShore training test page to contain training with a lowercase t. So that didn't work. But let's keep this up for a while. What I want to do is introduce the before and after method. You just use this @before sign. And we went over this before, but I just want to stress this. @before is an annotation. We'll talk more in depth about annotations in the future. But what it does is before each test, when you use this before method, it will execute these steps. So what we want to do is before the test starts, we want to start our WebDriver instance. And when we start using remote WebDrivers, you'll see that there's a lot more setup than this single line of code which can exist in your page. And then after our test, we want to close our browser down after our test completes. I guess we'll stick with teardown is the traditional method name for after steps. So before our test starts, we start our driver. After our test completes, we close our driver. And now when we run our test, let's close our extra Chrome instances. All right, so we're going to run this test again. Not a very exciting test, grant you, but we're going to lay down some framework here in a minute. The before and after steps are a crucial part to being able to do cleanup. If we have an assertion error, if we have some other error or exception, or if our test crashes for some reason, then it will not close down the browser. And you can see this time it did close down the browser. We still get this failing test. Same problem, expecting OneShore training test page to contain training lowercase. Let's correct it, get it passing, and commit. All right, it opens up the page, it closes down the browser, and the test passes. All right, we're good. Let's go ahead and commit. So what I want to do is I want to add these two tests. So in IntelliJ, I can go to Git. I can add the files. It looks like they're already added. That's right. It prompted me. It gave a pop-up when I created the files. Then I can commit. And I also want to make the commit to my pom.xml. So I can actually go up to my whole project level. Now remember, it creates this IDEA folder, and it creates, I think there may or may not be an IML file. If there's not, maybe that's part of the problem. Let's go back, look in here in our project structure. So here we're listing, we've got our pom.xml and our root. We've got our source main folder and our source test folder. We've got our target. Yeah, I don't see the, oh, it's the IDEA folder is there, but so yeah, it looks like there's no IML file, which is kind of strange. But what I want to do is I want to make sure my git ignore, yep, it has ignore the IML, ignore the IDEA folder, ignore, you know what, I am not even going to worry about these things. I want this to look clean to me. We'll worry about if any of these show up, we'll add those in. But so my git ignore file tells me to ignore my Maven output and ignore my IntelliJ project. So now I can safely go to my root folder. I can add all files, and then I can get commit everything, and it will bring up, and here we check, what is it adding? It's got simple Selenium test, simple test, and pom.xml and git ignore. These changes are all going to be committed. Okay, so create simple test project with JUnit and Selenium dependencies. Specify Java SDK version 1.8 in Maven compiler plugin. So this is already a little bit more. I should have probably committed my Maven project without any tests in it. Configuration. Add simple JUnit sanity test. Add simple Selenium test. All right. So I can commit, and I can commit, and I also want to push this here. So I'm going to push this to GitHub, and then you can grab this immediately afterwards. So flipping on over to GitHub. So we've got the training Java Selenium repository, which is a public repository. Did it not work? Uh-oh, permission failed. Could not read from remote repository. We'll try from the command line. No, same problem. Could not read from remote repository. Git pull.
I guess you can try with sudo or something.
Nope, it's almost undoubtedly my SSH key.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I don't need to vim it. I can id rsa.pub. It's probably something I used for something else recently, and it's not here on this project. So I'll go to the project settings in GitHub, and I will add, actually, I guess I need to go to my not organization, my user profile settings. Nope, I want to go to settings. SSH and GPG keys. Okay, yeah, it looks like I don't have this key for this account. I'll just paste it here. And that's okay if you want a key already in use. Well, that's because I'm using it for another account. All right, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. I'll just create a new one. Yeah, sure. Oops, I guess it didn't like that. Let's call this dot Java Selenium training, or is it training Java Selenium? I will just call it one short training. No passphrase. Oh, it doesn't like. Okay. There we go. And then I can change my password. All right. Oh man. Oh, I didn't import it, did I? All right. Now I can go back to my there's our repository. Let's add a README just for sanity. Make sure it pulls. Okay. So now I'm going to pull the README file, and then I'm going to add my existing files. Okay. Nothing to commit. Go back in here. Actually, I'll just do it from the command line. Git add dot. Oh, is everything there? All right. Looks like we're going to have something. Okay, good. Now we've got our repository. We've got our source test Java. We've got our two test files. We've got our pom.xml. It contains our Maven compiler plugin, contains our JUnit dependency, our Selenium Java dependency, and our AssertJ dependency. So you can now go through, and then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kill this off. close my IntelliJ down. And I'm going to completely eliminate my project. And I'm going to start up IntelliJ again and check out my project and try to run the tests. All right, so what I want to do is get from version control. That's not it. Let's go back over here to our thing. I want to click on clone, grab this URL, try this again. There we go. Training Java Selenium. So you should be able to do the exact same thing if you have IntelliJ IDEA installed, if you have Eclipse or NetBeans, or if you just run it from the command line, you should be able to pull the project now, and you just have this simple skeleton project, and you should be able to run it, and your test should work, provided that you can get the dependencies, and I did everything right. All right, so here is experimental. You must accept the terms of the legal notice. Okay, let's accept the terms of the legal notice. IntelliJ. If you're not good, I'll switch to NetBeans. Is NetBeans even still around? NetBeans was an old Java IDE developed by Sun Microsystems back in the day. Might not even be around anymore. NetBeans.org. Anyway, forget about that. We're using IntelliJ, at least for today. So we've got our README. We've got our pom.xml. Looks good. And we've got our test files. So we've got our simple sanity test. Let's add an insanity test so that we have both. We'll have one passing and one failing. We can run both of these tests together by clicking on that link at the top, or by clicking over here on the project bar and doing run simple test. Now there's one more way we can do this. We can also go into our project, and we can, if we have maven available, MVN, I can type maven test. And I may need to specify the tests to run because it doesn't follow the naming format of, it should be test sanity and test insanity. Oh, it did run, great. So we've got 2 tests run and 1 failed. Why did it fail? Because, well, because it has insanity. Oh. So we have here in the IDE, this one is green, the sanity test. True is true. This one is red, it's a failure. True is not false, and you can see here. We can even change this, so we'll use AssertJ, or not, yeah, AssertJ. Assert that true is equal to false. That's a little bit more verbose in this case, but let me show you what happens. I don't want assert, or I don't want JUnit asserts, I want AssertJ asserts. So import static AssertJ core API. That's the only downside of AssertJ, is you can end up mixing it up. With your other assertion library, assert that. And we don't really care that much about the output from our passing test, but our failing tests, we actually want this one to pass. But when you're insane, you don't know you're insane, I guess. So run this again, and I'll show you why I like AssertJ. One of two reasons. One is this assert that method doesn't take two arguments. It takes a single argument, your expression that you're testing, and then it has all these methods extending to it, versus your ham crest assertions, which can get really ugly. But now we have sanity tests. Oops, it's running again. And now we have a comparison failure, expected true, actual false. And I can see the actual diff if I wanted to, if I was doing like a string compare or a list comparison. That might be useful, but it's not for true and false. And so we can see that's running. And then we can also run our simple test. And you saw when I ran that from the command line, it ran both of these. It ran the simple test and the sanity, and the simple Selenium test. But this is working. And if either of you have trouble with Chromedriver, you can again specify here in your setup. What you need to do is you need to do system set property, and then you want what is it? Is it a Chromedriver path? Well, I need to look it up. Set property. Is it WebDriver Chromedriver path?
Yeah.
WebDriver Chrome.driver. That's what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So WebDriver.Chrome.driver, and then this would be your path to it. So I'm going to assume that it's. I'll put it in temp Chromedriver, and now it'll fail for me, but because Chromedriver is in my path, I used Homebrew to install it on my Mac. I don't need to set this property, but I can download Chromedriver to simulate it. I think on Windows users, it becomes a problem. But I want to grab Chromedriver. You want to make sure that you get the specific version of Chromedriver. I've mentioned this before. Get the version of Chromedriver for your version of Chrome. So I want to go to About Chrome, and you may have to automatically update this when it is. So it looks like I have version 81 of Chrome. So I want to download Chromedriver 81 for Mac. The driver executable does not exist. Now that I have it, looks like I already had it downloaded. No surprise there. Let's actually bring it in here. Oh, there is no source main, so I'll just bring it right here for now. Because I checked it out from the repository and it didn't check in those folders because those folders were empty. Git will ignore empty folders. So now I have Chromedriver. What I want to do is I want to make directory source. Well, let's do it through the IDE so I don't make any mistakes. So new resource, not bundle. New directory. Externally added files can be added to Git. Oh, that's talking about my Chromedriver. So yeah, I want to create resources. Source test resources. All right, so I want to move Chromedriver to not source test resources. Oh. Oh, it looks like we got a mod in. All right, so we've got this file. Let's view the file. It's in source test resources. I don't want this Chromedriver mac.zip. I'm actually going to move that back out. I'll just move back to downloads. All right, so now I have Chromedriver. I need to be more specific in this. Now I want this to be a relative path. So what I want to do is I want to use user_dir. I can also use, actually, instead of using user_dir, let's use our class loader. So it'll even work if this was a jar file. So get class loader. Now this is a little bit of Java magic. What it's doing is it's telling me to get the class loader from my Java runner for whatever this class is. Now I want to get a resource. And actually that's too much work for this, and I don't actually need to get this file. So what I want to do is I just want to get the user_dir. So I think it's user.dir in Java. We'll get the property of the current directory where it's running. So the directory where Java was run from. So I'll do system get property user.dir. And let's do this in a test. We'll make it a temporary test, but so we're going to get this property. I think we need to get property name, right? System get didn't externally add another file. Oh, string user_dir equals system get property, yeah, user_dir, and then we'll just print this out and see what we get. Okay, good. That's what we want it to be. So now what we want to do is we want to here actually we can just do user_dir. I think it might have been easier to just use the class loader, but what we want to do is we want to append source test resources here. So let's see, how do we want to append the path? We could just literally paste the string, right? Source test resources. / Chromedriver. Now let's now, if you're on Windows, this is going to be chromedriver.exe and your path is going to be different. But this should be fairly straightforward. And then what we want to do is we want to test that this file exists. Windows, this would be chromedriver.exe. Now we can paste Chromedriver here. Just to be a little more specific. So good, we've got a path here. Now, I'm going to manually test this by going into my terminal and listing it. No such file or directory exists. I don't have my slash there. So I need a slash before source. Run this one more time. And of course, that's not going to work because I mistyped Chromedriver. All right, and we'll manually test that, and then we'll add an actual test. Still doesn't like it. Oh, because of Chromedriver without me. Okay, we're going to assume that works just so I can feel dumb when it doesn't. Now what we want to do is paths.get Chromedriver path. We'll introduce a local variable, which will be this path. And then assert that. Assert that we'll use assert true in this case. Actually, let's see. I've never done AssertJ tests on file. So let's see. Assert that path that to file. No, they don't have file assertions. All right. So we're testing here that the path we're getting for our Chromedriver exists. And it passed, which we expected it to. Now let's do one more thing. Let's check if we're on Windows, we'll add the exe automatically. So I don't have a way to test this. Are any of you guys on Windows?
Nope.
Yeah, I'm on Windows.
All right, so I'll check this in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Java to get my os.name. And if it starts with Windows or contains, right? So here's the next check. Let's do it in its separate test. Public void test Chromedriver if on Windows. So we want to get the OS name. All right, so we just run through this test really quickly, see what OS name gives me. On a Mac, it should give me, I don't know, Mac OS or OS X or something like that. A Mac OS X, it does both. On Windows, it should do that. If it runs on Windows, I should get a Windows VM to run on. Now, if OS contains Windows, here, we'll start here with the base assumption. Chromedriver equals Chromedriver. If OS contains Windows, Chrome it equals Chromedriver.exe. Now, what we probably want to do is include in our test framework here either links to or installation path of different versions. So we might have Chromedriver _ Mac, Chromedriver _ Linux, and Chromedriver _ Windows. We might actually have different versions of Chromedriver, but for now, this is what we're going to do. We'll do OS equals or Chromedriver equals Windows, and then what we want to do is we want to assert that Chromedriver need a T and assert that Chromedriver maybe we should change this to Chromedriver file name. Chromedriver, propagating typos. Assert that Chromedriver file name. Have another typo in here somewhere.
The typo is.
Oh, I don't have, I just need to do import assertion. Import static AssertJ. All right. And the typos here too, yeah. Chromedriver file name. And then I want ends with exe. Now this should fail for me, but it should pass for you in a minute. Expecting Chromedriver to end with exe. Okay, so now this is a challenge. This is totally unrelated to Selenium. But what I want to do is I want to be able to test this. I now have created a dependency on my operating system. So first of all, this is all in a test. So I want to rename this. So I'm going to start building my framework here. New directory, source main Java. Yeah. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to create a class that says get Chromedriver executable. Actually, I don't. Well, we'll start with that. I wanted that to be my method. Public class, let's refactor. So refactor, rename. So now I want this, I want to take all that I've written and put it into my framework code. So you do red, green refactor. I've got a failing test. I want it to pass. But now I'm refactoring it out of test code into production code. So I'm going to go ahead and take all this. And so I'm getting my Chromedriver file name. And what I want to do is, if my OS contains Windows, I want it to be Chromedriver exe. Otherwise, I want it to just return. Chromedriver file name without the exe. So this is obviously the part where I have a dependency. So we are going to use that. We're going to inject that, right? So now, get Chromedriver executable with OS name. I could create this mock that mocks how I get the system property, but now I don't have to. I can just test it here. And so, I want to let's refactor and rename this test. All right. So this get user dir was really just one way of I guess we're not getting to that point yet. So now I can get it if it's on Windows or not. Rather than doing this in the test, though, what I want to do is I want to say my OS name. Let's find out what it's expected to do. I guess we can just go with starts with Windows. So this is our setup. And what we want to do is we want to do we'll go back to our Chromedriver Builder. We need to be able to access this. So on our Chromedriver Builder test, we need a new Chromedriver Builder. Get Chromedriver executable. And then we pass in our OS here. Let's move this down so it's legible. So now we're not dependent, right? So I can do the same test for Mac or for Windows, and I'm not hard coding my OS. And in here, I can do another test that it will work on Mac. So let's go ahead and run this first one to test that it runs on Windows, and we should get a success. And then we'll combine it with the user dir test, or with the user dir. This isn't an actual test. This is just checking to see that we wrote. I mean, this is a test of that my framework works. It's not testing my system. Okay, expecting Chromedriver to end with exe. So that didn't work. Chromedriver, get Chromedriver executable. If OS contains Windows, Chromedriver file name equals Chromedriver.exe. Oh, it did pass. My system was just moving slow. All right. So now let's write another test. And now we want to test if it's on Mac that it returns Chromedriver. Test Chromedriver, and let's be more specific. Test Chromedriver file name. If on Mac. And then Mac OS X, right? And now we can do this as well. Oops. Eliminate all this. And so now my test framework, I just do that system get property os.name. Expect, oh, I did not update my test. Okay, so let's be more specific here. Chromedriver. Oh wait, you want is equal to. Chromedriver.exe. All right, so I guess that is the hour. What I'm going to do when these tests pass, let's commit and push. Well, actually, let's make sure our Selenium test system set property. So we'll take this. We're not doing that. We want our user dir here. So we're moving this to our Chromedriver executable. Get Chromedriver path. Again, this user dir is kind of a dependency, but it shouldn't be platform dependent. But let's go ahead and refactor this out of our test into our test framework. Nope. We'll want this get Chromedriver path. All right, so let's go here and implement this. We've got our user dir. We need to move this out of our test. Okay, string, we'll call this relative path equals source test resources. Now, we'll work on making this more specific at a later date. In other words, that it's more flexible, because if we run our Java executable from some other location than our project root, which with Maven, we're not going to, for the most part. It can be done, you can specify that, but it usually won't. So this is going to work, 90% of the time and leave people baffled the other 10% of the time. But we've got the relative path, and then we want to string Chromedriver file name. Let's go ahead and keep this consistent. So let's refactor and rename this. Oh, it wants to go off screen. Refactor. Oh, well. I want to get Chromedriver file name. Okay, so now I can I want to pass in my OS. for OS, and it's not userdir, it's userdir plus relative path plus Chromedriver file name. All right, so what we're doing is we're getting the base directory, the user directory. We're appending the source test resources to get Chromedriver. And then Chromedriver file name, we're getting the Chromedriver file name. That's our code here. It's going to be chromedriver.exe if you're on Windows. It's just going to be Chromedriver if you're not on Windows. This leaves us open. We could have Chromedriver underscore Mac or Chromedriver 81 underscore Linux. It could get more complex, but this leaves us the ability to do that with this Chromedriver file name. Oh, we need a return value, so let's return this. And here's where we'd probably add some logging, maybe even some typo fixing. And let's consistently camel case since we're on Windows, or since we're on Java. And I could even, okay, we've got some happy camel casing for those of you who like camel casing. We've got get Chromedriver traf, we've got get Chromedriver file name. Let's update our tests. Test get Chromedriver file. Here, let's do get Chromedriver file name if on Windows underscore test, just to make older versions of JUnit happier. And we don't need this get userdir test. Don't have tests that test something that you know is going to work. It's okay to write the test if you don't know, but once you understand how the operating system works and your test is only testing the operating system or the library you're consuming, you can remove those tests. We know userdir works, we know the path to it. We might want to do this a different way, but let's go ahead. Get Chromedriver file name if Windows test, get Chromedriver file name. And actually, it should be test. Let's do it this way. Get Chromedriver file name if on Windows. Test Chromedriver file name if on Mac. And you can see here, we have the logic here in our test. OS is Windows. Rather than actually calling OS, calling the system get property to get the OS, because that puts a dependency on our system. And if it passes for me on Mac, it'll fail on Windows. If it passes for Nevena on Windows and fails on Mac. So we want to make sure that's all good. So we've got these two tests. We want to test that it's working on Mac and on Windows. And then we want to test that we're getting the full file name. It looks like we've got some compile errors, so it's probably not going to run. Right here, we've got our Chromedriver path, and this still isn't working. Oh, we need to specify our OS in that file. So equals system get property os.name. Then we can pass that in there. Just checking this out. Okay, so let's run our Chrome Builder tests, or Chromedriver Builder test. All right, both these tests. On Mac, we get Chromedriver. On Windows, we get Chromedriver exe. Small victory, but baby steps get you there. So now we need to test the we've tested Chromedriver file name. We want to create some tests. So let's create a test that Chromedriver path exists and that it is an actual file name. And then I'll add the Chromedriver.exe to my resources as well. So let's expand this out just because I have a small screen size. Test Chromedriver path exists. Chromedriver Builder. Get Chromedriver path. In this case, I'm only going to check that it exists for my current operating system. So I'm going to do system get property os dot name. Is that right? Yeah, OS name. Fix that typo. String path equals, and then we'll go back to our, did I delete that test? I did. But what I want to do is I want to assert that we actually don't want the file except for our assertion. Assert that new file path exists. And it does. So now I have this really cool ability. So now I'm getting my path and I'm checking that it exists. I'm going to throw in system out here just for illustration purposes. All right, this path exists. Now, what if I change this OS to Windows 10? I want to make this pass. I suppose I could create another test for it. Okay, that fails. Why does it fail? Because it doesn't exist, even though I've got the right path. So how do we make this pass? By downloading Chromedriver for Windows and putting it in that path. So I'm just going to grab Chromedriver win32.zip. This in source test resources. To unzip it. Probably an easy way to do that. So now I have a Chromedriver, which is a binary for Mac, and Chromedriver.exe. So I can run this on either system now. We'll add this on Windows. let's view the files and add, yep, we want to add chromedriver.exe. Although adding chromedriver.exe or the Chromedriver for Mac to my test library, not really the best practice. But for simplification purposes and because GitHub is free, Chromedriver path exists on Mac. And I could do exists for my system. So now I have these two tests. I can test that it runs on Windows, test that it runs on, or test that it passes on Mac. So it should pass here. How you guys holding up? You're sticking around to see this part? You're just waiting for the code to check in so you can find all my errors. All right, so this passed. Now, this Windows failed last time before I downloaded it. It should pass now. And I didn't change the test. I didn't change the framework code. What did I change? I changed the environment. I downloaded the chromedriver.exe for Windows and added it to the expected path. So those are three vectors where things can change. And this is kind of the moral of the story today. Number one, a test may change from pass to fail or whatever if you change the test. Maybe you had a bug in the test, or maybe you're a cranky developer and you just want your code to go in. So you change the test. I don't know how many times I have seen tests that pass because someone came in and commented out the assertion or hard-coded a truthy answer to it because they thought it wasn't important. That's why you want to make sure you write tests that are important. And if your test is no longer important, to delete it. Keep your tests simple so you know exactly what they're doing. And make sure you test only one thing. Because if tests are complex, if tests are slow, if tests are flaky, or if tests are not understood what their value is, then someone may consider your test unimportant, comment out, or force a pass on your assertion and sneak something in that is frankly a lie. So number one, the test may pass or failure based on the test logic itself. Number two, obviously, what you're actually testing, the system under test, in this case, this Chromedriver Builder class that we're testing, which by the way has nothing to do, right? We've done nothing with Chromedriver other than set it up and test it initially for our framework. All the testing we've been doing is not testing with Selenium, but testing our hypothetical Selenium framework. And this Selenium framework that knows how to get the Chromedriver and use the right version of Chromedriver for the right operating system I'm executing on. So the system under test is the second thing. And it's really the primary thing. Ideally, your tests are only testing your system under test, but your tests are also code and they can fail too. So second thing is the underlying system that you're testing changes. And the lesson we learned here at the end is that another factor external to your tests and external to the product you're testing may cause changes in test failure. In this case, it was the chromedriver.exe being in the path set for the environment. So the environment change, whether it's your file system, whether it's your network, whether it is an external service that your system depends on. So for instance, a payment processing system for your e-commerce system, maybe an address lookup system for your fulfillment system. Maybe you're digesting Twitter and there's a bug in Twitter or in the Twitter API, something like that. Or probably the most common, your underlying data in your database or whatever internal system you're representing your data. The data may change. So the data or environment is the third thing in a test that may change to cause failures in your test. And we saw here how the OS name, whether it's a Mac or Windows or hypothetically Linux, and I may switch to just trying to do everything on Linux just because I like it. And I've been testing out Ubuntu 20 desktop and really like that. And I've been having fun over the last week. Instead of preparing my lessons, I've been having fun trying out different Linux desktop environments, KDE and GNOME and Cinnamon and Mate. Anyway, so the three things that you three things that may affect your test outcome: the test itself, the system you're testing, and the environment, which could encompass the file system, the network, the database, or whatever. So now we've got this test, Chromedriver exists. The last thing we want to do is make sure our simple test works, that we're getting Chromedriver for the operating system we're running on. And remember, on my system, this works fine. And it's probably a good idea to just change your environment rather than do this. But I wanted to make sure that this WebDriver Chromedriver path is working. I've never even tested this with the simple case of it working on my system with a hard-coded path. I probably should have done that. But let's go ahead and run our test in the final stage. And if it passes, I'll commit the code and we'll call it a day. Dun, dun. Chromedriver cannot be opened because the developer cannot be verified. So, environment again, macOS cannot verify that this app is free from malware. I think I need to go to my security settings in my OS system. Test failed. Chromedriver was blocked. Allow anyway. So now I'm making another environment change. And do I need to authenticate? Okay, let's try this again. All I did was make that OS change for Chromedriver exe. It still doesn't like it. Oh, it's starting it now. Okay. Ah, here we go. We're opening it. We're going to our training page. We got our title. Yay. So this is a potential hiccup. As you can see, even after I went through and did that, it still wanted me to go through another manual pop-up. You can't do those sorts of manual pop-up things in a continuous integration environment, but we'll save that problem for another day. Short answer is we want to remove these sorts of complexities from our test. But I also wanted to illustrate this because this is a real world scenario that on the first week or two where I was doing this, customers, or rather attendees here, were running into this error. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go back to my project. This is kind of the ritual you should do at the end of every successful session, and an hour, hour and a half is a good amount of time. What I want to do is I want to add the files, and I'm going to commit to Git and push to my repo. Okay, so what have we done? We have, first thing, what we want to do is we want to say the main thing we've done. So we want to allow tests to run using specified Chromedriver executable for host OS, Mac or Windows. Then we get a little more specific. Add Chromedriver Builder, or add logic to find Chromedriver executable under source test resources. Find user dir and append WebDriver and set Chromedriver or WebDriver Chrome path system property, and then include WebDriver executables. Let's do this up here. Allow tests to run using specified Chromedriver executable for host OS, Mac or Windows. include WebDriver executables. Under source test resources, add logic to find Chromedriver executable. And then find user dir and set WebDriver path system property. Let's commit and push. Now, your job, should you choose to accept it, guys, is to check out this code from One Short Training, Java Selenium. I posted it into the Zoom and the Slack chat. If you can check out this repository and execute this code locally and let me know how it goes or tell me what I've done wrong. Thanks a lot. Do you guys have any comments? Ahmed, I saw a hand raised. Andre?
Yeah, I should go first.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to ask you where, as a best practice, where should we put the driver creation? In the framework or in the tests?
You probably want to keep it out of your tests. In this case, oh, I've got to push still. In this case, I don't have much of a framework, right? I have this Chromedriver Builder. No, I have it up here, the Chromedriver Builder. So my framework is going to be under source main Java. My tests are going to be here. So I have here, my test still looks pretty clean. Oops, not this one, my simple Selenium test, right? This test should probably exist in my framework, and my framework should probably be a separate project. But while this still looks pretty clean, this could be better, right? I have 3 lines of code here that are totally unrelated to my test in my setup. It'd be nice if I could push more of this into the framework, and we'll get to that eventually. But yeah, definitely better to have this information in a separate.
I asked you this.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, it sounds interrupted, but I saw many guys do this job on test level in test source basically, and not in the framework, and that's why I was asking.
Yeah, it gets distracting, right? If you have, it's nice enough that it's in the setup method and not as part of my actual test, but it's distracting if you have, here I have 3 lines of code. If I have also getting the user dir, putting the relative path, determining if it's chromedriver.exe, I could have 10 lines of code right here before my test. Even if this was in a base method, it'd be very distracting if you're trying to debug what's actually going wrong with your test.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why it's nice. And you can see here, I have some other things here. I have tests that this is hypothetically a real test of my system under test, right? I'm testing training1shore.com. This is my system under test, but this Chromedriver Builder test, this is a test of my test framework, not a test of my system. This should be refactored out, and it will eventually. But for illustration, we've combined it. And it's also a good practice not to try and build a complex framework, right? Chromedriver Builder is something that should probably have been built 3 months into my testing, once I have 50 tests up and running and providing value, that I could refactor this Chromedriver Builder. It'd probably be best to just start off with my simple Selenium test, just doing new Chromedriver until I'm executing it on different systems, or I'm executing against Chromedriver, Firefox, Safari, Android, iOS, whatever. Then when I get to that level of complexity, then I should add that complexity to my test framework, not before. But since we're a distributed group and some of the people have this on Windows, I wanted to introduce this as a way to make it easy for people who are getting started so that they can test along with us and use this simple framework, which literally this framework does nothing but start Chrome, open a page, and get the title. But slow building blocks, we'll introduce page objects, we'll introduce parallelism, and ironically, all I wanted to cover today was introducing different weighting strategies using implicit weights, explicit weights, or custom weight strategies. But I wasn't prepared, and so this is what I ended up doing. Anyway, appreciate your comments. And I will be posting the code and the video online. Or the
Thanks
code's
for
already up there.
Yep, you just pushed it.
All right, we'll see you.